Hi there, Wayne Hedlund here from Wayne Hedlund Consulting. In this video tutorial, we are going to talk about dependencies. Now, for some of you, dependencies are scary, intimidating. You don't know what they are. You don't understand them. When people use them, they seem confusing. For some of you, you've been using dependencies, but sometimes you find it clunky. And for some of you, you just love dependencies and you'd like to learn a little bit more about them. In this video, I'm going to do my very best to work through all of the basics of what dependencies are, how they function in Asana, and how we can leverage them in such a way that they will create, hopefully, great efficiency and better collaboration and help you be more productive as a team. All right, so let's talk first about what is a dependency in Asana. Simply put, a dependency is when one task is dependent on another or blocking another. To give you an example on the screen, you'll notice here I have 4 tasks. They're associated with going on vacation. Let's say my wife and I were going to take a trip and we're going to go on vacation. I see there are 4 tasks that are associated with this trip. Well, one of them is determine the location, figure out those dates. We also have to book flights and reserve an Airbnb. So there are some dependencies here, right? So first of all, these 2 tasks here need to happen before we can fully finish these tasks. Now, let's determine the location. Let's say that I'm responsible for that. Maybe my wife is responsible for these 2 items and I'm responsible for these. So when I figure out the location, I can go ahead and mark that as complete. And now my wife, at the very minimum, she can get started on at least researching the Airbnb. She can't fully reserve them yet because we don't have those dates. So there was a dependency that says, hey, she can't even start this task until I at least figure out that location. That was a dependency. Now she can get started on this, but she still cannot finish this until we figure out what the dates are for that vacation. That is what a dependency is. So let's talk a little bit about why we want to use dependencies in our organization. First of all, dependencies clarify the order of what's supposed to happen when. What happens first? What happens second, third? When can I get started on a task? And when should I wait? So helping create that kind of simple understanding of the flow of work is one of the benefits of dependencies. We also have accountability, not the finger pointing accountability of how dare you, but to basically greater transparency of, hey, who's responsible for what, who's waiting on who, whether, is someone waiting on me or am I waiting on someone, and who is that? And incidentally, because we're using Asana's dependencies features, we're also going to get notifications when something that was blocked or was dependent on something else. When it gets unblocked, we can tell Asana, hey, you can start working on this now. It's unblocked. So it actually helps not just with that accountability, but also with communication. One of my favorite features in Asana is the dynamic rescheduling feature, where when we move the date of one task, we can tell Asana to follow some certain rules, also move some of the other dates on tasks as well. And so we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. It enhances visibility in terms of, especially using the timeline or the Gantt view, these 2 views up here, we can actually see the workflow and the flow of work, but we can see it in such a way that we can clearly understand, hey, here are the tasks that are dependent on one another. This is where those arrows come in and some of the various things there. And you'll say, oh, why is that arrow red? Well, because there's something wrong with the dependency and we need to go in there and try to fix it, right? So helping us kind of clarify that. And then last of all is just greater collaboration cross-functionally. So I can have a task in my project that I'm kind of the owner of, or maybe I'm just the owner of that task, but it can be blocked, being blocked by maybe another task in another project. So there's the ability for us to kind of go, okay, I'm waiting for someone else somewhere else to get something done. And so now I can see that that's happening and why, and it helps us kind of work better together. All right, so now that we have just a basic understanding, let's dive into dependencies and let's talk through, just using as an example, 5 tasks that are associated with maybe hosting a small event. We're gonna have 15 people show up for a special event for some kind of training or something like that, right? And so we've got 5 tasks associated with the activity. Of course, our last task right here, our milestone is the actual day of the event. So let's just say for fun, let's go ahead and say that's going to be in 2 weeks on the 30th. And so I've set the first date for this. And first thing before we can set dependencies, we do need to set those dates, right? Now, technically, we can try to create those dependencies before the dates, but the way Asana thinks and acts, it actually is a little easier to get those dates set first. So obviously what most people in Asana are used to is going in and clicking on the due date, selecting the date that we're going to pick, or they go into the details pane and select the date as well. I'm going to show you a way that's just a little bit quicker, and that is by understanding how to use the Gantt view. In particular, not the timeline, but the Gantt view. If I go to the Gantt view, it lets me see all of my tasks, whether they have a date or not. And it also shows me this kind of side, or in the main area, the main pane here, I can see dates that rolling from left to right. So this is showing right now the month of July. So in this view, I can actually very, very quickly establish the flow of work without having to click individually in each one of these and set the date. I'm going to do that by just mousing over the date that I want to set. So let's say this host event is going to be on the 30th, and I just set the date right there. I want finalizing the event materials, let's say, is going to happen here. Promote the event. That needs to happen no later than, let's say, Wednesday before. Confirm the guest speaker and secure the location. You see how I was able to very quickly set those dates without a lot of effort. And we can also do start date and end date, etc. So super quick and easy. Now that we have done that, we can go ahead and start talking about setting up those dependencies. Right now, nothing is dependent on anything else. So we need to do that first. Now, there are 2 or 3 different methods or ways that we can set dependencies. The way that a lot of people do it, I find to be super clunky and a little bit overwhelming. But I'll show it to you because sometimes it just is required to do it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and select my first task. I'm going to click Secure Event Location. I'm going to click on it and open the sidebar. Now, right here under sidebar, in the detail pane, I can see the dependencies section, and I can click on Add Dependencies. What I want to do is I want the event location to block guest speakers. In other words, I don't want us to confirm guest speakers until we have nailed down that location for our event. So the first way of doing this, the little bit more funky way, is I can click on Add Dependencies, and then I can search for Confirm Guest Speaker. And I see it right over here, so it's not too hard in this scenario, and I can select it. Now, I have selected it, but you'll notice that it's not blocking, it's being blocked by. That's because Asana just set the default as a blocked by in the scenario, and you can see that by the little hourglass. So it is important in this scenario for me to click on the down drop and make sure I change this to blocking. Now, this one is the one that's being blocked by this one, right? So if I click on this task, I can't even know, I can no longer, I'm clicking right now on my mouse and it's not letting me. Now I could come over here into the details pane and mark it as complete, but then Asana is going to give me a notification that says, hey, you sure you want to be marking this as done because there's something else that needs to happen first, right? So it's blocking, being blocked by that secure event location. I'll do one more. Let's say that I'm going to click on promote the event and I want this one to be blocked by confirm guest speaker. So again, I can click add dependencies and type that confirm guest speaker, select it, and Asana automatically selected as blocked by. I don't have to change it to blocking because I selected the task that's going to be blocked by instead of the one that's going to be blocked. If that seems confusing, once you start experimenting with it, it'll make a little more sense. Now, this is the kind of inefficient method. There's a little bit more of an efficient way of doing this in a lot of scenarios. So I'm going to remove this dependency by clicking on this X. I'm going to jump over to this one and also remove this one. And let's look at a much more efficient way of setting dependencies for these tasks. And that is, believe it or not, jumping back over to my Gantt view. When I pop into the Gantt view, I can open up the section where these tasks are associated with, and I can see them each right here. Here's the milestone that's on the 30th, host the event, and I can see each one of these. So much quicker. All I need to do to set dependencies is to mouse over the task. And when I mouse over it, you'll see these little dots appear, and when I mouse over the dot, it kind of shows me a hover, and I can click and drag. You see how right here I'm dragging, so I can literally drag this little line from this task, which is secure event location, woo, and then drag it over to this one. I just did that. I'm going to go ahead and make this one dependent here. I'm going to make this one dependent right here, and this one dependent here. And I have, come on, work into it. There we go. And I have set my dependencies for every single one of these. Not super hard. Much, much quicker and more efficient. So if I jump back over to my list view, I can see all these tasks have dependencies. That's just kind of a pretty sequential dependency order. Oftentimes the dependencies that we set up would not necessarily be quite as simple as this, but for demonstration purposes, it works pretty well. All right, so we've established kind of how to create those dependencies and how to use them. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to jump over and look at some settings that we can use to kind of add even more power to what we're trying to accomplish. So first of all, where are the dependency settings? And you'll see what these settings are and why they're important in a moment. So the first place I could find settings is if I select the date of a task that already has a dependency established, you'll see a button right over here, right at the top, right above the start and due date. It says project dependency settings. And I can click on that button and I can set some settings. Now, it's not showing me all the settings, but it's showing me the ones that are associated with the date fields here. So I'm going to click Save Changes because I wanted that to be set to none. But probably another method, maybe one that's a little bit more meaningful, is instead of trying to find it up here, we can also go back into that Gantt or the timeline view, and we can go to Options, Dependency Settings. When I open that up, it actually gives me a couple of other options that are a little bit more advanced. So we've got None, Consume Buffer, and Buffer. What are these? These are related to when we shift dates. So shifting dates. Right now, if I come in here and shift dates, that is, if I change the date of, let's say, this task right here to Thursday, nothing happens to the rest of the tasks. And sometimes that is our desired behavior. But other times when we want to move things around, we want all of these tasks to move with us. So if I move one task, I'd like other tasks to move as well. And that's where these shift date settings become a little bit more meaningful or powerful. So for this use case or for this demonstration, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull these out just a little bit more, spread them out a little bit so we can see a little better what this is going to look like. So let's explore the different options that we have. I'm going to go back into Options, Project Dependency Settings. Right now it's set to none, which again means I can go ahead and move these to my heart's content, and it's not going to change anything. If I jump back into those options and look at Consume or Maintain Buffer, let's discuss these for a moment. So I'm going to hold off on Consume Buffer for just a moment because it's a little bit more complicated to understand. But let's talk about Maintain Buffer, where actually a lot of the people I work with, this is the one that they like the best. And you'll see that Asana has given us two options for maintaining the buffer. And if you don't understand what the buffer is, you're going to in just a moment. So I'm going to select the top one here for all dependent tasks. And let's just save changes and see what that does. Now, if I decide to move this task, instead of it moving independently from the other tasks, now it's actually going to ingest all the tasks that are part of that stream of dependency. So if I move this task on the 25th to the 23rd, that all of the other tasks move with it. And the maintain buffer means we're maintaining the buffer or the gap or or slack between each of the tasks that are there. So if I want our event gets changed all of a sudden, it's not going to happen on August 1st, it's going to happen on August 6th. No worries, all of our tasks move with it. Pretty straightforward so far. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what happens if a task is marked as complete. Let's say that I already secured my event location. I'm ready to mark that task as complete. So you'll notice, first of all, I have that filter set, but let's just go back here. So you'll see here that it's grayed out, and that means the task has been marked as complete, and my dependency is still showing. But now, watch what happens if I decide to move things around. If I move this task 2 days forward, you'll see that this task did not move. Why? Well, because we already did it, right? As far as Asana is concerned, we've already completed this task and it will no longer move. And that is the desired behavior in that scenario. All right. So with that in mind, so now let's jump over to the next one. The next one in project dependency settings is for downstream dependent tasks. So I'm going to select that one, and this one is a little bit different. Let's say that for some reason we want to adjust tasks that are downstream from a task, but not upstream. And the downstream and upstream is literally just associated with what we visually see here. So the flow of our river, as it were, is obviously going from left to right. So this is downstream, this is upstream. So because I just set that to adjust tasks downstream only, what that means is if I choose to move this task, it will go ahead and move the tasks downstream from the tasks, but it will not move these tasks upstream from the task, right? So let me go ahead and do that right here to the 28th. These tasks moved, great. These stayed the same. All right, let's move this back over here, and that's how that's going to work. Again, if I move this task, which there are no tasks downstream, everything else stays the same because there's nothing downstream. All right, and then the last one is consume buffer, which is a little bit more complicated. So let's talk about what consume buffer does. Consume buffer assumes that you want to start squeezing tasks together without messing up the rhythm of work. So this event is happening on August 1st. We have no intent or desire to change that event. So when I move this task, let's say for some reason on the 21st, I'm just not going to get it done on that day, then what's going to happen is Asana is going to say, hey, don't move these other tasks unless you have to. So if I move it to the 22nd, the gap, as it were, or the margin between these two tasks has gotten tighter. Nothing else has changed. If I move it here, again, nothing has changed. But let's say I'm really running late and I'm going to move it to the 28th. Asana is going to move this task as well, but it's going to keep the gap between these two tasks at a minimum. It's going to consume the buffer. You see that? And so basically Asana is saying, well, this one is still dependent on this. So let's just keep them close together. And wow, the week of the 28th, you better book it because you have a lot to do, right? So that is an example of the consume buffer and what it's for and how it's used. It's not used necessarily often, but I do see use cases where it is very important. But let me go back to my list and let's look at some things here. So we're talking about we know where to find our settings. We understand the no buffer, the consume buffer. Sounds little notifications here, and maintain buffer upstream and downstream or all tasks. So the last one that we have here is the set work schedule. Let's look at the set work schedule for just a moment. This is actually kind of a nice feature, but you do need to understand how it works because you'll look down here at the bottom under our project dependency settings, and we can select work days and ask Asana to adjust dates based on those work days. So right now, I happen to know it's probably set for a Monday through Friday work schedule. So with a Monday through Friday, what that's going to do is when, and let's go ahead and change that project dependency. We'll do it to maintain buffer for all tasks. And so watch what happens, let's say, to this task right here on the 25th. I'm going to move this task to the 24th, which theoretically should move this task to the 26th, but the 26th is a weekend. So Asana is actually, not only is it not going to move it to the 26th, it's going to move it to the 28th. So if I move this to the 24th, Asana moves this one here. If I move this one here, everything moves, but move it back and you'll see this task skipped the weekend. And I think you kind of get the idea. So let's reset and let's look at this one more time. If I go to my options, project dependency, and click on project settings, down at the bottom, I can actually say, hey, what is our actual work schedule? And I can come in here and say, actually, we take Fridays off. We don't work on Fridays here. And so what Asana is going to do in that scenario is as I start moving it, Asana is going to skip those Fridays. So if I come over here and move this here, Asana is going to go ahead and move this task 2 steps forward because we don't work on Fridays anymore. See, so Asana is skipping those Fridays in every single scenario based on that information. All right, so that's how the work schedule setting works. And if for some reason you want to set that or set work hours, you can mess around with those as well. Most people usually don't need to do that. Now those settings associated with the work schedule, they don't necessarily apply to other scenarios associated with projects, so you'll have to experiment to make sure you understand what they're for. In this scenario, as we're talking about dependency, that's really what the focus is how will Asana determine whether or not a task is going to move or not based on weekends. All right, it took me a while to get that laid out and explain it, but let's go ahead and talk about the last section, and that is dependency types. So just understanding dependency types for a few moments. Some people, will notice if you go into a task, let's say here, this task right here, whoops, we go into write the report task, and I'm going to make this, maybe dependent on edit the report. I'll go ahead and add that dependency, edit the report. There it is. So it's being blocked right here. Oh, nice. Almost messed up there. Let's go ahead blocking. So I've got this task is blocking this task. You'll notice that when we set those dependencies, there's also a category that will give us 4 options: FS, FF, SS, and SF. And as you can imagine, these are unique in terms of the different kinds of dependencies that we can have. This is more advanced, and to be honest with you, the vast majority of time, you probably don't need to focus on this too much. Most of the time, dependencies are going to be in the category of finish to start. Now, in practicality, that's not true, but most people don't feel the need to uh, uh, get down to the minutia of setting every single dependency perfectly. That said, if you don't set it perfectly, you will notice more red when you try to look at your dependencies here in the timeline view. All right, so let's walk through each of these different options and settings so you can understand how they work. The first one is finish to start, which means task B, which is this one right here, cannot start until task A is finished. So in other words, we have to really get write the report done before we can do anything else. And so if I pop over here and give this date, let's say task A is going to be, we'll say on the 17th, task B is going to be right here on the 18th. So there's a dependency between the two. And before I can finish this task, I have to finish this task. That's finish to start. All right. The next one that we have, and we'll just mark that one as complete. The next one we have is start to start, SS. Task B, monitor our ad performance metrics, cannot start until task A has started. So launch the ad campaign. So in an environment of a marketing environment, that would make sense. So I can monitor things while the campaign is happening, but I cannot monitor things until the campaign has launched, right? So in this scenario, if I wanted to set that up, I would go ahead and set those dates. So here's my due date and here's my due date. And I can basically create the dependency between the two of them, but I'm going to switch it to start to start. And you'll see Asana kind of moves things around just a little bit to show us that that is a different flow for that particular kind. All right, that's start to start. Let's go ahead and mark those as complete. The next one we have is finish to finish, right? So finish to finish means, as you can imagine, task B right here cannot finish until task A has been completed, right? Finish to finish. Task B can't finish until task A is finished. So I can't complete editing all my video series until I've finished recording all of my video series. That doesn't mean I can't work on this, but I can't finish this until this one is finished. So if we set this dependency or this task right here as being due here, and this one's due here, and I set that dependency, I'm going to have to set that to finish. And again, Asana kind of shows us visually how that's going to look. And then the last one, and the one that is really not used very much most of the time, there are not a lot of use cases for this one, but there can be on occasion, and that is start to finish, the opposite of finish to start, which basically says, hey, we can't actually finish task B until we've started task A, right? So let's say I have a new learning management system platform that we are going to launch. And you know what? I can't archive our old training content, can't finish this until we have launched that platform. Again, in that scenario, we would want to make sure that we've set the dependencies properly. So in that case, we would do start to finish. All right. So that gives you a real high level understanding of the different dependency types. Again, to be honest, if you're confused or you don't know which one to use, it's probably safe bet to just go ahead and use the standard finish to start option. All right, so I have finished talking about dependencies, the things that I had on my plate today to hopefully provide some value to you and your team on understanding dependencies and how they can be used a little bit more. I will be providing some other videos to provide more context into how dependencies could be used. For instance, you might want to check out my video that talks about subtasks being dependent or blocking, I should say, the parent task and setting that up in a task template way so that we can easily and quickly establish a date rhythm for tasks and be able to move those dates around quickly and easily without making it difficult and cumbersome. So that would be another video that has been published, and you'll definitely want to check that out. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this helpful. Have a fabulous, fabulous day.